In the world of criminal investigation, every case begins with a person whose story deserves to be remembered. This channel is dedicated to examining the investigative methods used to uncover the truth behind real crimes, while keeping the focus where it belongs, on the victims and the pursuit of justice. Through careful analysis of evidence, forensic science, and detective work, we explore how investigators piece together clues, reconstruct events, and ultimately bring answers to families and communities. This is not a channel about glorifying criminals. It is a channel about understanding investigations and honoring the lives behind the cases. Welcome to The Investigation.
Thank you for setting that up. It really is the lens we have to use for today's case.
It absolutely is. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really complex stack of sources. Court records, journalism pieces, behavioral analysis transcripts, all focused on the 1986 murder of Sherri Rasmussen.
Right. And it's a case where for 23 years, the Los Angeles Police Department believed they were looking at a botched burglary.
But they were completely wrong. So our mission today is to explore how forensic breakthroughs finally solved this cold case and, how a single bite mark brought down one of their own.
And above all, to honor a family who absolutely refused to let the truth be buried. Because it is a profound responsibility to look at these files. We have to ground our entire understanding of the trial in the human reality of what was lost here.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start with who Sherri was, because she wasn't just a case file.
Not at all. Sherri Rasmussen was an exceptional, highly driven person. She was born in Washington, raised in Arizona, and she was actually so intellectually gifted that she entered college at just 16 years old.
Wait, 16? That tells you so much about her internal engine right there.
It really does. She was accelerating past all the normal milestones, and that drive, it didn't stop at graduation.
Right.
By the time she was 27, she was already the director of critical care nursing at Glendale Adventist Medical Center.
Wow, at 27.
Yeah, holding a master's degree from UCLA. She was teaching clinical classes, and she had this singular professional goal. She wanted to elevate the stature of nursing in the nation.
So she was on a mission. She wasn't just clocking in and out. She was trying to change an entire medical institution.
He was.
And for you listening, I want you to really keep her physical and mental presence in mind as we go through this. Because Sherri was commanding.
Oh, absolutely.
She was incredibly fit. She regularly took aerobics classes. So when we look at the crime scene later, those traits inform everything. She was not a passive target. She was a strong woman and a fierce protector of her own life.
And grounding her and her family context is just as important. Sherri was deeply loved. Her younger sister actually described her as the glue that held their close-knit family together.
Yeah.
And in early 1986, she was just extraordinarily happy. She had recently married the man she loved, John Retton, and they were building a life together in a condo in Los Angeles.
Which makes the events of February 24th, 1986 all the more devastating. The timeline of that Monday morning, it starts off completely mundane, but it shifts into a nightmare so fast.
Yeah, it does. Sherri stayed home from work that day. She had sustained a minor back injury in an aerobics class the day before.
So she just decided to call in sick and rest.
Right. Her husband, John, left their Van Nuys condo for work at about 7:20 in the morning.
Leaving her home alone, just relaxing in her sleepwear.
Yes. But by 9:45 a.m., just a couple of hours later, a neighbor noticed that the garage door to the condo was wide open, and there were no cars inside.
That's such a red flag.
It is. Then that evening, at 6 p.m., John returned home. He walked up the driveway to find broken glass scattered everywhere. Sherri's BMW was missing.
Oh, man.
And when he entered the home, he found his wife deceased on the living room floor.
I can't even imagine the psychological shock of walking into your own home and finding your spouse like that.
It's unthinkable. Witnesses describe John as having this deer-in-the-headlights look.
Which makes total sense. He was completely paralyzed by the trauma.
Yeah.
And the scene itself was incredibly chaotic.
It was a brutal forensic reality. Sherri had been severely beaten and shot 3 times. The perpetrator had actually used a thick, quilted blanket wrapped around the gun to muffle the sound of the shots.
Wow. But there was one piece of evidence that changed everything later.
Right. The medical examiner found a clear bite mark on Sherri's left inner forearm.
Which speaks directly to her strength.
Yeah.
That bite mark was sustained during a desperate, prolonged hand-to-hand struggle for her life. She fought back hard enough that the killer had to use their teeth as a weapon.
She fought incredibly hard. So when the initial detectives arrived to secure the scene, they started collecting the physical remnants of that struggle.
Right.
They gathered a thin white rope, some broken fingernails, and most importantly, they took a swab from that bite mark on her arm to test for saliva and blood typing.
but the scene was confusing. Let me use an analogy for you listening. Imagine walking into a room where someone has dumped out a jigsaw puzzle, but they've intentionally swapped some pieces with a completely different puzzle. That is what investigators walked into.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It was a paradox. And in the chaos of those swapped puzzle pieces, they missed glaring clues, like a bloody fingerprint left right on a CD player.
How do you miss a bloody fingerprint in plain sight? I mean, really?
Well, it points to severe investigative tunnel vision. The LAPD very quickly settled on a singular narrative, a botched burglary.
Because of the missing car.
The car and a stack of stereo equipment piled near the front door. They concluded that Sherri interrupted two burglars who panicked and shot her.
But the contradictions to that theory are just staggering.
Yeah.
If you stop and think like an investigator for a second, the staging becomes so obvious.
Oh, entirely.
Like, if you are a burglar trying to steal electronics, why would you meticulously stack stereos by the front door, but leave expensive, easily pocketable jewelry completely untouched upstairs?
You wouldn't.
Right. And of all the things to steal from a woman's purse, why was the couple's marriage license the only personal item missing? A burglar does not care about your marriage license.
No, they don't. And those are the exact analytical questions that Sherri's father, Nuys Rasmussen, was asking from day one.
He knew something was wrong?
He did. Nuys repeatedly and desperately begged the detectives to look away from the burglary theory. He wanted them to investigate John's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie Lazarus.
And we have to clarify who she was. She wasn't just an ex-girlfriend.
No, Lazarus was a sworn LAPD officer, and she had been actively stalking and harassing Sherri for months. She had even shown up at Sherri's hospital in full police uniform to intimidate her at work.
So you have a victim's father literally handing detectives a named suspect with a documented history of stalking, a clear motive of jealousy, and the physical capability to commit the crime. How does the department justify ignoring that?
By falling back on institutional bias, they dismissed Nuys entirely. They actually told this grieving father that he watched too much television.
That is so insulting.
It really is. Now, in 1986, forensic science relied on primitive ABO blood typing. We didn't have the biological tools we do today, but the real failure wasn't technological, you know? It was cultural.
Because Lazarus was a fellow cop.
Exactly. The detectives simply refused to seriously investigate one of their own. And because of that blind spot, the case goes cold.
And it doesn't just go cold for a year or two. We were talking about a 23-year gap. For over 2 decades, Nuys and Loretta Rasmussen are left with nothing but grief.
23 years. Nuys actually spent his own money hiring private investigators. He wrote letters. He continually brought up Stephanie Lazarus's name to a police department that they built a brick wall between his family and justice.
The emotional toll of that is immeasurable. But while the investigation sat dormant, the scientific landscape was undergoing this monumental revolution, right?
A total revolution. The leap from the forensic capabilities of 1986 to the 2000s fundamentally changed cold case investigations. We moved from simple blood typing to PCR, STR, and mini-filer DNA testing.
I have to stop you there because whenever we dive into cold cases, reports just throw around terms like mini-filer as if it's magic. If that bite mark swab has been sitting in a cardboard box for 20 years, the material is degrading. How does a lab actually extract a profile from something that old?
It's a massive biological leap forward. Think of DNA like a massively long instruction manual for a human being. Over 20 years, the pages of that manual get torn, waterlogged, and scattered.
Right.
Older technology needed the whole book intact to read it. But modern technology focuses on STR short tandem repeats. These are tiny, highly unique fragments of DNA that survive degradation.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the PCR process, polymerase chain reaction, acts like a molecular photocopier. It takes those tiny surviving fragments and copies them millions of times until there is enough material for the machines to read a clear profile.
So that preserved swab from 1986 isn't just a piece of evidence. It's like a biological time capsule waiting for the right key.
Precisely.
Oh.
And in 2005, an LAPD criminalist named Jennifer Francis was systematically testing cold case evidence. She utilized this amplification technology on that bite mark swab and made a startling discovery. The saliva left on Sherri's arm belonged to a female.
Which instantly obliterates the 1986 theory of two male burglars.
It shatters it completely, but incredibly, even with that revelation, the case languished for another 4 years.
Wait, 4 more years?
Yeah. It wasn't until 2009 that two detectives, Jim Nuttall and Pete Barber, finally reopened the murder book, and they did something crucial. They looked at the file without the institutional bias of 1986.
They used timeline reconstruction and behavioral profiling, right?
They did. And they realized something profound about those stacked electronics by the door.
They realized the puzzle pieces had been swapped.
Yes, the physical struggle between Sherri and her killer had been incredibly violent. There was blood and broken furniture everywhere, but the electronics were neatly stacked. A panicked burglar doesn't stick around after a fatal shooting to meticulously organize stereos.
No, they run.
Exactly. The scene was deliberately manipulated to simulate a property crime.
And suddenly, the echoes of Nuys Rasmussen begging them to look at Stephanie Lazarus 23 years earlier become deafening.
Deafening. The new detectives realized their prime suspect is a high-ranking, currently serving LAPD art theft detective.
Which creates an investigative nightmare. I mean, how do you hunt an experienced detective who knows every surveillance technique, every database trigger, and every interrogation strategy in the book?
You have to operate with absolute, extreme secrecy. They couldn't even run her name normally in the system. They created a generic case number to avoid triggering any internal alerts.
So they have the 1986 DNA profile, but they need Lazarus's current DNA to compare it to. And they obviously can't just ask her for a cheek swab.
No, they can't. So they launch a covert surveillance operation against one of their own. They formed a specialized tailing unit. They followed Lazarus off duty, blending into the background, just waiting for her to discard something.
And they eventually tailed her to a Costco.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They watched her finish a soda and throw the cup and straw into a trash can. The moment she walked away, they covertly retrieved the straw.
It is the definition of high-stakes intelligence gathering. But gathering the DNA is just step one. The true breakthrough is the moment the trap snaps shut.
And that happened in May 2009. The lab returns the results. The DNA from that Costco straw is compared to the amplified DNA from the bite mark on Sherri's arm. And the mathematics of the match are staggering.
What were the numbers on that?
The lab determined there was a 1.76 sextillion to 1 chance that the DNA belonged to anyone other than Stephanie Lazarus.
Wow. A 17 followed by 20 zeros.
Yeah, it is beyond reasonable doubt. It is mathematical certainty.
So, armed with that certainty, Detectives Nuttall and Barba need to get her in an interrogation room. But again, you can't just call a veteran detective into homicide without her defenses going up instantly.
They needed a tactical ruse. They approached Lazarus under the guise of needing her specialized expertise regarding an art theft suspect. But they told her the suspect was being held down in a secure jail lockup.
Which is brilliant structural psychology. Because to enter a secure lockup, every officer has to surrender their firearm.
Exactly. They neutralized her physical threat while simultaneously disarming her mentally. She walks into that room thinking she's the expert consultant.
And this leads to one of the most fascinating interrogations ever recorded.
It really is. Lazarus sits down, and for the first few minutes, it's just casual shop talk. But as Nuttall and Barba slowly steer the conversation toward John Ruetten and a nurse named Sherri, you see an immediate physiological shift.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The behavioral analysis of this tape is a masterclass in the autonomic nervous system betraying a suspect. I want you to picture this. As the questions get closer to 1986, Lazarus exhibits what profilers call the turtle effect.
Oh, yeah.
She literally shrinks her head down into her shoulders, which is an involuntary response to make herself a smaller target. And you can see extreme flushing. The blood rushes to her face and chest as her skin tone turns bright red.
Her body is experiencing a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline. Her fight or flight response is kicking into overdrive.
And her eyes. There's this rapid threat tracking. Her head is whipping back and forth between the two detectives. She is no longer having a conversation. She is visually assessing the threat level in the room.
Because Lazarus was an interrogator herself, she recognized the walls closing in, but instead of remaining silent, she tried to fight her way out using tactics she likely deployed on her own suspects.
Like what?
She attempted a maneuver called chaff and redirect, throwing out irrelevant, highly detailed information to derail the detectives. At one point, she literally brings up a random earthquake from the 1990s trying to steer them off the timeline.
But Nuttall and Barba don't take the bait. They use an iterative approach. They don't slam the DNA on the table. They let her talk, letting her lock herself into verifiable lies about how well she knew Sherri.
And then they slowly tighten the net. She realizes her baseline denials aren't working, so she shifts to what behavioral experts call fabricated affect.
Right, the fake emotions.
Yeah, she tries to mask her rising panic with exaggerated fake smiles, high-pitched laughter, and forced confusion. She starts using distancing language, saying things like, "It was a million years ago," using the passage of time to minimize her connection.
It is incredibly jarring to watch a seasoned detective laughing and shrugging while being implicitly accused of beating and shooting a woman to death. But the performance couldn't save her.
No, the intelligence gathering was simply too thorough. When she finally realized the room was a trap, she walked out, only to be immediately intercepted in the hallway, handcuffed, and stripped of her badge.
So the resolution of this case moves from the interrogation room to the courtroom. And prosecuting a police officer for a 23-year-old homicide is a monumental legal task.
It's a huge hurdle. During the 2012 trial, the defense was fighting from a corner. They couldn't argue away the mathematics of the DNA, so they tried to cast doubt on the chain of custody.
The standard defense playbook, when the science is unbeatable, attack the envelope.
Exactly. They pointed out that the 1986 evidence envelope holding the bite mark swab had a small tear or hole in it, arguing the evidence had been mishandled or tampered with over the decades.
But the prosecution's narrative was basically an armored tank. They didn't just have the DNA. They brought in experts to explain the behavioral evidence of the staged burglary. And then they introduced the murder weapon, which is where Lazarus's own actions sealed her fate.
The weapon was the final nail. The ballistics report from 1986 showed Sherri was killed with a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. At that time, LAPD officers were mandated to carry .38 caliber ammunition.
And the prosecution revealed a stunning piece of circumstantial evidence, right?
Yes. Just 13 days after Sherri was murdered, Stephanie Lazarus filed a police report claiming her personal backup .38 caliber revolver had been stolen from her car.
But she didn't report it stolen to her own department. She reported it to the Santa Monica Police Department. She deliberately compartmentalized the information, ensuring the detectives investigating Sherri's murder wouldn't see a red flag about a missing gun that perfectly matched the murder weapon.
It was highly calculated, and the jury saw entirely through the defense's attempts to muddy the waters. The overwhelming combination of forensic science, timeline reconstruction, and her own contradictory behavior led to a swift verdict.
Stephanie Lazarus was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison.
She was.
Taking a step back, the irony woven into this investigation is just thick. The very institutional loyalty that protected Lazarus in 1986, the refusal to investigate a fellow cop, was ultimately dismantled by the meticulous, unbiased police work of the 2009 detectives.
It took objective investigators to undo the damage of biased ones. But if we pull back and look at the true legacy of this case, the spotlight has to move off the perpetrator. It has to return to where it belongs. Sherri Rasmussen and her family.
Because the advocacy of Nuys and Loretta Rasmussen is the only reason this case didn't evaporate into the archives.
Their endurance is astounding. Nuys fought the LAPD's blind spots for a quarter of a century. He took on an entire municipal structure.
And thankfully, Nuys lived to see his daughter's killer convicted.
He did. He passed away in 2020, knowing he had finally secured the justice he promised Sherri. And the impact this case had on law enforcement practice was profound. The family's subsequent civil litigation forced a massive public reckoning.
It really became a blaring warning siren about the absolute necessity of transparency when a department is policing its own.
You cannot let assumptions dictate evidence.
No. Right, and for those wondering if Lazarus ever admitted to what she did, the story had one final legal chapter just recently. In 2023, after decades of denials, Lazarus finally became eligible for parole.
And at that parole hearing, she finally confessed. She admitted that she confronted Sherri, bound her, and shot her. A parole panel actually initially granted her release based on her age and time served.
But acknowledging reality isn't the same thing as demonstrating genuine remorse.
No, it isn't. In late 2024, the full parole board reviewed the case and rescinded that grant of freedom. They listened to John Ruetten and Sherri's family. The board noted the highly calculated nature of the crime, bringing a backup weapon, improvising a silencer with a blanket, meticulously staging a burglary, and determined that her late confession was manipulative rather than contrite.
So she remains in prison.
Yes, she does.
This brings us back to that jigsaw puzzle we talked about at the beginning. In 1986, detectives walked into a room with swapped pieces. But instead of looking closely at the pieces that didn't fit, the untouched jewelry, the missing marriage license, the female stalking suspect, they forced the puzzle together into a picture of a routine burglary.
Because our justice system relies entirely on human beings to collect and interpret evidence. But human beings are inherently flawed, and we're biased. We often see only what we expect to see.
Which raises a deeply important, sobering question to leave you with.
If seasoned homicide detectives could look at a glaringly staged crime scene and see only what their biases allow them to see, allowing a killer to hide in plain sight for 23 years, how often do our own unquestioned assumptions dictate the reality we experience every day?
That is such a powerful thought. As we close out this deep dive, we ask you to remember Sherri Rasmussen. Remember her brilliance, her dedication to caring for others as a nurse, and the fierce love of a family that refused to let her story end in the shadows. And we challenge you to continually question your own blind spots. Thank you for joining us on this investigation.